In the late 70s, Michael Mann wrote a screenplay with its plot focusing on a determined LA detective, hot on the heels of a professional crew of thieves. The original screenplay came in at 180 pages, and in 1989 he directed a TV movie based on this script called LA Takedown. LA Takedown, however, was a severely abridged version of his original story. The movie itself, while passable, is very rough around the edges and it hasn't aged well at all. But a few years later, Mann found himself in the perfect position to revisit his original story and rework it. By using LA Takedown as a prototype of sorts, he was able to trim away what didn't work the first time round and further build and expand upon what did. With a much bigger budget, production, and a cast made up of some of the best actors Hollywood had to offer, he was able to bring his original idea to the level he wanted it to be, and it all came together in what is arguably one of cinema's greatest crime dramas, Heat. Neil McCauley, played by Robert De Niro, is a professional thief at the top of his game. He runs an exceptionally tight crew of other highly experienced criminals and thieves and has, up until now, had great success in what they do. However, their latest heist goes south thanks to the character of Waingro, a psychotic with an itchy trigger finger they have just recently recruited into their ranks. Lieutenant Vincent Hanna, an LAPD robbery homicide detective played by Al Pacino, gets in on the case and becomes dead set on catching them and putting them away. And at its most basic level, that's what Heat is, a simple story of cops and robbers. But thanks to Michael Mann's excellent writing, this story is graced with intricate layers of complexity, which adds so much vibrancy and texture to its overall narrative and structure. In a typical story of this nature, you normally have a clear protagonist and an antagonist, but with Heat, these two elements are somewhat blurred. On the surface, Vincent is the protagonist and Neil the antagonist, but the two characters are almost mirror images of one another. Both are exceptionally good at their professions and are 100% dedicated to them, but both suffer the consequences of that dedication in the form of struggling relationships and isolation. Vincent's marriage, his third as he points out in one of the movie's most memorable and poignant scenes, is crumbling apart due to the nature of his job. He keeps all of the angst that the job brings locked up inside and he never lets any of it out. His wife Justine, played by Diane Verona, has been long struggling to get Vincent to connect with her, but Vincent won't break. Justine's daughter from her previous marriage, played by a young Natalie Portman, is struggling with anxiety problems and other mental health issues due to her father's feckless attitude, which also adds further weight onto Vincent's shoulders. Neil is a solitary animal and has spent most of his life alone with no emotional attachments, believing any connection to a significant other would jeopardize his ability to do his job. This changes for Neil, however, during a chance meeting with a woman called Edie. The two of them develop feelings for one another and their relationship swiftly turns romantic, which in turn means Neil breaks his own code that he has lived by most of his life. And this theme of family and relationships in general is very much at the forefront of the movie. It explores both the criminal and the law fraternities, giving us an insight into their personal lives with scenes depicting good times and bad. And it's this element that helps separate Heat from other movies in the same genre. The writing and directing is in a league of its own with this one. The dialogue is precise and gives a unique weight to the vast majority of the movie's characters, but most notably to Vincent and Neil. Heat was the first film to finally bring Hollywood legends Al Pacino and Robert De Niro together on screen at the same time, for a scene that's become infamous in the movie world. At this stage in the film, Neil knows that his crew is under surveillance, and Vincent knows that he knows. Vincent decides to strike while the iron is hot and sits Neil down for a one-to-one. Up until this point, they only know one another through photos, video surveillance, and reputation, but here they finally get the opportunity to take a deeper look into each other's lives. Their dialogue is some of the best I've ever heard. During this exchange, they discover that they're not too different from one another, and even come to have an unspoken level of respect for each other too. The scene also serves another purpose. It humanizes them. They're no longer just a target or a goal or an obstacle. They see a human behind each other's eyes, and what's interesting here is that both characters feel the need to tell each other that they won't hesitate to put the other guy down if needs be. It's almost as if they might respect each other a little too much and have to remind themselves that they are indeed enemies. Pacino and De Niro were backed up by some other serious Hollywood hitters here too, including, but not limited to, Val Kilmer, Jon Voight, Tom Sizemore, Danny Trejo, and William Fichtner.
Kilmer, Sizemore, and Trejo make up Neil's team, offering their skills as the muscle and wheelman respectively, while Voight plays the fence for the crew. Fitchner plays a character called Roger Van Zant, a businessman who handles investment portfolios for offshore money laundering and drug money. The first heist, which I'm about to get into, involves Neil's crew robbing Van Zant of his bearer bonds, which sets up Van Zant as one of the movie's antagonists. While Heat is mostly a crime drama, it has some exceptional action scenes. The first heist introduces us to Neil's crew and how they operate. Their planning is meticulous and their methods are tight, swift, and aggressive. Murder isn't their priority unless absolutely necessary, in which case they execute without remorse. The heist is amazingly shot and laid out, and its pace is perfect at building the tension before, during, and after the robbery. But this is just a mere taster of things to come. The movie's action reaches its apotheosis during the bank heist. Things go horribly wrong and downtown LA is turned into a war zone in what is without a doubt one of cinema's greatest shootouts. Neil's crew has successfully robbed the bank and they're on the way out of the door. Just when they're nearly home free, Chris, played by Val Kilmer, spots the armed police across the road and without any hesitation unleashes hellfire into the street. Within seconds, gunfire erupts from all directions as the cops swoop in and try in vain to pin them down. It's an adrenaline-fueled ballet of exceptional violence. Neil and his guys press forward through the carnage, desperate to create an opening to escape, and all the while Vincent and the LAPD try as hard as they can to neutralize them. The scene is a tour de force. It's directed and shot with such mastery and patience, and the sound design is mind-blowing. The decision to place microphones all around the streets to capture the raw sounds of automatic gunfire echoing from the skyscrapers is inspired, and it's one of the things that makes this shootout stand out from any other. It's absolutely terrifying and it makes you feel like you're caught right in the middle of it. It's very clear that Michael Mann has an affinity to LA. When you look at this and his other crime drama, Collateral, you can't help but be sucked into its environment and be made to feel at one with it. He photographs LA with as much love and care as, say, a sculptor who carves a statue. I said in my Collateral review that he makes LA a character in his own right, and it's easy to see where he got that from. I also like how he shows LA from a lot of unconventional locations as well. You won't find any Hollywood sign or 6th Street Bridge in this. Heat clocks in at 2 hours and 50 minutes. It's not a short film, but unlike most movies we get in this day and age, its lengthy runtime doesn't feel like a waste. Due to its complexity, Heat certainly requires a longer than average runtime, but any film with a similar duration will almost always make us question if some things could have been trimmed back or left out altogether. Waingro, the psycho who compromises the first heist, is definitely integral to how the whole film plays out, but one could argue his volume within the film might be a little too much. There's a subplot that develops that explores him being a serial killer, but this doesn't necessarily have any impact on the overall story. Instead, it just kind of feels like filler to further underscore his sadistic nature, and to give us an extra scene to show us just what Vincent has to deal with every day. And in a similar vein, Natalie Portman's character also feels like filler, only really serving the purpose of providing more emphasis on Vincent and Justine's struggling marriage. Now don't get me wrong, it's all good stuff. But is it necessary? Well, that comes down to individual opinion. And speaking of which, for me, Heat is a masterpiece of cinema. Pretty much all the essential elements that go into making a film great can be found here. It's a story told with a lot of heart and expertise, and it has a depth to it that just might surprise you. If you like your movies to be multifaceted as well as down to earth and entertaining, then I don't think you can go far wrong with Heat. It's excellent.